Today's guest is a behavioral analyst. Her name is Theresa Inman, and we actually met, I don't know, a month or two ago on her podcast, which is called Parenting on the Spectrum. And I realized that there she is. I see you, Theresa. Let me get you on here. I really need help with, and that is how to deal with aggressive children. Hi, Theresa. That was so smooth. So I know I feel like this issue comes up all the time in our community. Our people are dealing with physically and emotionally aggressive exes. Then their children start taking on some of those behaviors and they feel all kinds of shame because they're thinking, what did I do to deserve this? And then their ex is saying, you deserve this, and they don't do it with me. And they feel like everything is their fault. And so before you even introduce yourself, can you just say how common it is for kids during high conflict divorce or post separation to be aggressive toward their parents?
I don't have exact numbers. However, I can tell you children will do what they see. They imitate what they see modeled by their parents. And so as a result, they're going to act like this. So it's like, if dad treats mommy like this, then I'm going to treat mommy like this, especially if mommy does not respond to it in a way that can reduce that behavior, and I'm not saying to, again, calmly and maybe remove themselves or whatever it is, showing that she doesn't like it, or if it's dad that he doesn't like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give that message so that the child knows this is not an acceptable way to behave. Then they're less likely to, because they've seen the effect that mommy's upset or daddy's upset and they're not comfortable with the way they're being treated.
Wow. So, Theresa, before we go on, can you introduce yourself formally and say who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I am a board certified behavior analyst and infant toddler developmental specialist. I work with children from birth onward. So whether they're diagnosed with autism or they've been diagnosed with a developmental delay, some of them have been diagnosed with ADHD, just a myriad of diagnoses, children who are not um, performing well and navigating the world in a way that serves them.
Wow. All right, great. So today we want to talk about aggressive kids. And I was wondering if you could think of any, or what you see as any misconceptions that people have about kids being aggressive. It could be any age, little, tween, teens, but what they think, oh, it should be this way, and it's not.
Oh gosh, how many times have I heard a parent tell a 2-year-old, you know better than this? And I'm thinking, they don't. They are merely mirroring what they see in the environment. So we have to be mindful of what we expose our children to, whether it be our behaviors or what they watch on television or the games that they play. What are we modeling for them? What are we exposing them to that can bring about these behaviors? And just understand they're not from birth to 7, children are in a meditative state. Right? They're just receiving everything from their environment. So it's not like they're making these conscious decisions. Well, I'm going to and I'm going to that. They are reacting to their environment, to what, based on what they've seen, based on what they've experienced in their environment.
Wow, so it's that we assume that kids know more than they actually do?
Well, I wouldn't say, listen, children know a lot, right?
Yeah.
But what we're thinking, we're like expecting them to be making these conscious decisions,
Hmm.
right? And that's
Like
not
we
what it
do.
is. Exactly. Because, and then my thing is, I always ask parents, like, okay, you expect your child to make a better decision. You are making childlike decisions at your age. You understand? Like they're imitating your decision making. You know, they're imitating what they've seen. So, and they're at their level, it looks a little different. Right. So, I've had to call parents out on, the tantrums they were having. I was like, you're having a tantrum right now. And for you, it looks like this. And for him, it looks, this way. So we have to be mindful of what we say and what we do in the presence of our children. And if we use terms like, oh, you're bad, then they're going to embody that. And I honestly, that's a term that I just, if I could remove it from the dictionary, from the English language, I would, because it's so judgmental. Actually, so it's good. right? They're both judgmental
Mm.
statements. And I remember a mom calling me once. I worked with her 3-year-old, and she called me in tears, telling me that her child believes he's bad. And I said, well, what brought this on? Well, and he went to preschool. So at preschool, because his teacher didn't tell him he was good, he assumed he was bad. So I prefer parents to use more, qualitative terms, at like, wow, you did this, specifically, you finished your work, you're a problem solver, you're a reader, you're a mathematician, you're good at math, you're good
Mhm.
at, like, remove those terms, or you're bad at whatever it is. Just, if they color something, just look at the colors that they know. Don't tell them, oh, I like it, or I love this, is whatever. Just look at the thing and say, wow, you used all these colors. And get curious about children's behaviors, right? Instead of judging them, get curious, ask them, you know, wow, that looks like, or is that, or tell me about what you just drew. And they, very young children will tell you exactly what they've drawn. And I've been corrected many times, like, oh, it looks like, and I've stopped, assuming what I thought it looked like.
Mhm.
I asked them, wow, so what are you creating today? Or what have you created? Or, tell me about your creation.
So
Yeah.
it's really approaching from a sense of curiosity and not judgment. And wow, I never thought of saying you're good as being judgmental, but it makes so much sense. Like you're good, you're bad. They're so
Yeah.
broad.
Exactly. And what's good to you may not be good to me, right? So
Yeah.
it's very subjective.
Yeah, for sure. What about any misconceptions with teenagers being aggressive? I mean, I worked as a high school English teacher, so I remember how teenagers can be very moody sometimes. And but what do you see with parents who have teenagers and how to deal with that a little bit? Or what are they doing wrong with teenagers?
Right. And again, I'm not going to say wrong. What can they do differently? I know I'm not throwing anything at you. I'm
Okay.
just, because again, that's also, I feel like I'm judging a parent when I tell them that they're doing something
Yeah.
wrong. Right.
Yeah, well, I'm like thinking about it going, ooh,
Right.
I'm glad you put me in check with that one.
Yes. So get curious, right? I've worked in middle schools where children had in units where they had very severe behavioral issues, and I learned that some of them, they may not have had dinner, they may not, like, what's going on at home or what's not going on at home. Does mom have 3 jobs and she's never home, right? Find an opportunity to connect with that child, right? If it's at school, find an opportunity to connect with them. If it's a parent, again, you get curious, what is going on? I remember once there was this young man who, I'd walk into the school. I mean, he was much bigger than I am. I'm 5'3" and much bigger, taller, and so, and every day it was, you this, you that, whatever, and I can't stand that lady, and blah, 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 blah. And one day he got so upset that he punched a wall. And I approached him and I said, I get that you're upset. I said, listen, you hit that wall really hard. Can I please look at your hand to make sure nothing's broken? And he actually gave me his hand. And I mean, I spent maybe 20 minutes inspecting that hand, not because I needed to, but because I was finding a way to connect with him, to show him that
Wow.
I cared. You
Mm-hmm.
know, then I asked about ice, which I think maybe, some ice might help, in case there's swelling. Let's, work to reduce that swelling, ask somebody to get ice and all this and that. The next day, another student approached me the same way he had, and he said, leave that lady alone. She's a nice person.
I love that.
So it's just, again, finding a way to connect. So whatever happened, if they come in upset, find out what happened. Are you okay? Just a question like that. Or what can I do to help? Because asking, are you okay? They're automatically going to say, yes, they're okay. Everybody says
Mm-hmm.
they're okay.
Yeah,
Because if
yeah,
I'm not okay, then there's something wrong with me. Right. So
yeah.
asking, what can I do to help? Did you have breakfast this morning? How did you sleep last night? Right. Asking questions that show you care
Mm-hmm.
actually helps diffuse anything, right? And initially they may brush you off or say, leave me alone, whatever. But again, if you keep asking that question every day, they're going to connect it. And there are even sometimes, parents who who have not connected with their children. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell them, have fun with your child. The first thing I want you to do is to be a reinforcer for your child. So have as much fun as possible with your child. And do it in a way that's not judgmental. Oh, you did, like never, you did this or you did that, or you're this or you're that. Wow, this happened or that happened. you know it's because it's always, there's a book that Oprah co-wrote called What Happened to You, instead of
Mm-hmm.
what's wrong with you. Because I remember once we had a foster child, 5 years old, and he had this screw thing attachment that I found under his pillow. And I was so afraid because I thought, oh gosh, what if that thing had moved and poked his eye while he was sleeping? And how am I going to explain this? And this child, like, what will happen to him? He'll be scarred, and, and it will be an emotional scar and physical scarring. And I was just going through all these thoughts. So I went up and I said, what's wrong with you?
Mm. Oh, wait a sec. Theresa, your volume is off.
Really?
Yeah, now you're back. Now you're back.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so you said what's
Yes.
wrong with you?
Yes,
And
I asked him, I was like, what's wrong with you? And then I realized I was coming out of a place of fatigue, of stress, right?
mm-hmm.
Because when we respond to our children in stress, we tend not to say things in a way that serves them.
Mm-hmm.
So then I asked, well, and then another thing I asked, which was in retrospect, could have been worded better. Why did you do that? And then he said, because something's wrong with me. Yeah. So that was like cold water to my face, such a wake up
Yeah.
call, right?
Yeah.
So I stopped asking why,
Mm-hmm.
and I stopped, you ask what happened, right? Don't come from a place of, again, judgment. Because when we ask why, people automatically put up their guard, right? It's like,
Yeah.
"Ooh,
Yeah.
what's going, so because it feels judgy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so you want to ask more, what's going on? How are you feeling? Those kind of questions. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah. You started answering one of my next questions, but before I go on, I just thought of something. Um, what are your opinions about calling the police when your kid is getting physically aggressive?
Oh
I know
gosh.
in a situation like this, because I've heard that in our community, it's not a good idea when you have
Mhm,
two parents who are really battling each other.
mhm. Yeah, it's certainly not a good idea, because what message are you sending to your child, right? You feel like, I'm afraid of you.
Mm-hmm.
Your child wants you to love them, not be afraid of them. They need your love. They crave your love, not fear. um yes, I get that it could be very dangerous, but again, if you come from a place of love, when you come from a place of love, that diffuses the situation, right? Come from a place of curiosity. Don't fight back. I mean, unless, okay, if it's super serious and you have to, block, do whatever you need to do, get yourself away,
Mm-hmm.
and let your child know, this behavior, not you are scaring me, this behavior is scaring me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You never want to say something where they feel judged, and then it becomes a problem later on. So I would absolutely hesitate to call the police, and I'll tell you why too. Then what will they do if they ever need the police?
Right. Right.
Right? They become afraid of them. And police officers, they're not trained in every area, so they don't always know how to handle things. And
Mhm.
children, in a lot of cases, end up really hurt. I mean, I've heard of children being hogtied and taken out of schools.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they call the police and they hogtie them to take them to, what do you call it? Like a Baker Act
Mm-hmm.
situation. So then again, they lose trust in the police system. And it's not, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the police officer. They don't know what they don't know, and they're just behaving. I want to believe, people think I'm crazy, but I always want to believe that people are operating from their best selves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm thinking with that too, when you're dealing with a very difficult ex, if you call the police on your child, that'll be weaponized against you, where they'll take the kid and see, mom or dad doesn't think that you're safe, but I can handle
Exactly.
you. And so they'll make it as though you're sending bad messages about them. That's
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember even working with with an autistic young man who used to on the way to school because he learned that if I do this, then I get to go home and hang out with grandma. Right.
hmm
So he would behave in this way. And again, it's not isolated to autistic children, it's just what we teach children, right? Based on what we do after their behaviors, right? So I went with the mom to school, and oh my gosh, because he would pull her hair, he would do all kinds of things on the way to school.
hmm
And somebody told her, call the police. I said, no, please
Yeah.
don't, because then what's going to happen? His first introduction to the police is going to be negative,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he will, who knows how he'll react in the future if something happens. So we actually worked with it. So if you're struggling, get help. Call a behavior analyst, call somebody who can help you in that situation to help you diffuse it, because every behavior has a function, and we look to determine what the function of that behavior is so that we can help you through it.
Yeah. I love that every behavior has a function. I'm writing stuff down, of course,
Yeah.
because I didn't take notes. Um, wow. So in general, you talked also about modeling in the beginning, how sometimes when our children are aggressive, we may be, of course, inadvertently modeling that something's okay. Can you get into that a little deeper? Like why, let's say that there hasn't, would there ever be a situation where a kid gets physically aggressive but hasn't witnessed physical abuse, or is it only when they see physical abuse that they are basically mimicking it?
It's not always. There are times when, if a child is born out of trauma, like I think of this one family I worked with, and mom experienced trauma when she was pregnant. And she was like, well, I was pregnant. He didn't experience the trauma. I said, he experienced it more than you did because he
Mm,
had no way of expressing this, what he was going through, So, and so he was still feeling it. And, of course, her body is full of cortisol. And of course, that goes
right.
straight to the baby
Yeah.
and increases that, just all the things. So it's very important that we understand that, because the mom was like, oh, no, no, he's never had it. So I had to explain to her he has, so we want to
People
be
think it's,
mindful.
yeah, I think people assume that little kids or babies or fetuses
Mhm.
don't experience trauma, but they do because of what you just talked about, the cortisol, the stress hormone in the mother's body.
Yes, absolutely. And even sometimes, I remember interviewing Elizabeth Franz. I'll never forget her. She's a mediator now. However, she said when she was younger, she felt like her parents should have divorced a long time ago, but they were staying
Mhm.
together for her. And she felt like it was her fault. Even at 3 years old, she felt that it was her fault. And because she said they would be arguing, and then she would go up to them and say, what's wrong? And they'd say nothing. So they
Mm,
made everything appear perfect for her. And she was like, oh my goodness. So a 3-year-old harboring this, which is why today she's a mediator working with families because of that experience.
that's amazing. And you think of how long it was in her identity to want to fix things or to blame herself for it.
Exactly, exactly. And it is not fair to a 3-year-old to have to burden to carry that burden, right? And it's like when we tell children you should know better, that's a burden we just put on them. We're just adding these burdens to their shoulders
Hmm.
because it's like, what am I supposed to know better? I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know? And what I want parents to realize as well, when you are in a heightened state of stress and frustration and all of that, your child senses that energy and they behave in ways they don't understand because of how you're presenting, and you may appear calm. Like last week, I was with a family and I was talking about, they're like, because the child would use more words when I was around. I said, because I'm calm, right?
Hmm.
You're not, right? And they're like, and then dad was like, you know what? I get it, because he thought he was being calm. And I said, well, then he's like, the other day, my wife told me to relax. And he goes, I am relaxed. And he's like, yeah, noted,
Yeah.
right?
What you just
Yeah.
talked about with that, with the 3-year-old sensing it when the parents, the mediator saying when that everything was, her parents saying everything was fine. It reminded me, I went to some screening at a domestic violence center a couple of years ago, and there were four women who had experienced domestic violence and were talking about their experiences. And one of them was saying that her parents never fought. And
Mm.
and then she ended up in a toxic relationship, and she couldn't think of why, if her parents always modeled that there was never any conflict. And she said that was the problem, is because when there would be a conflict, they would separate and hide, and they made us believe that a relationship was supposed to be without any conflict. So she became kind of ripe for one of these coercively controlling relationships where you basically put aside all of your own needs and desires to avoid conflict, and you focus on that other person. So it was the power was really imbalanced. But
Yeah,
I think that seemed to come from two parents who were thinking they were doing what's best, because we all try the best we can, hopefully, like let's keep the conflict away from our child. But then she doesn't know how to effectively deal with conflict because she never
exactly.
learned the skill.
Right. And that's what I tell parents too. Be, honest and open with your children, because when you're not, they believe, like, for instance, if they make a mistake, then they're like, oh, I'm the only one who makes mistakes. And now they're afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to present anything that they view as negative, right? So
Yeah.
we want to be very mindful of that. Show them your problem solving skills. Show them, how you handle different situations. Yeah. I mean, I know me when my children were younger, Lord, if I keep, I've told them over and over again, if I could go back knowing what I know now, I would be a rock star mother.
Wouldn't we all?
Absolutely rock star. Because I stayed in a domestic violence situation, domestic violence, like longer than I should have left the
We
first
all
day. Um,
we all did.
And, I remember, and I think what really did it for me, one day, my younger son, uh, I took him to a barber shop, and he was like, Mommy, remember that day when Daddy tried to kill you? Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no.
And I thought, oh my gosh, like, and I was trying to get him to be quiet, and my friend who was his barber was trying to, and he just kept, and I thought, but he was 3. What was I going to do?
Yeah.
You know,
What did you say? Yes, I remember.
I, honestly, I changed the subject. I did not, because I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I was,
Mm,
what? Because I had him at 21, so here I'm like 24 years
mm,
old, and
mm,
already been through this situation, and I had no, I was so embarrassed. And then my older son, who's just a year and 9 months older, who's like, was telling him like, don't, be quiet and don't say anything. And he actually said it another time. We're at the bus stop, and I was holding him, and yeah, he remembered. I thought, oh gosh, what have I done to my child? Like
So it
my
made an impression on him, but he was
it
curious and wanted
did.
to talk about it.
He did, and I didn't know how to handle it. I did not know how to deal with it, and actually, as a result, as when your your um your experience becomes your passion. So I've actually worked in domestic violence for a while, because I thought, oh gosh, maybe I could use my experience to help somebody else. And just I think I just came down this path, and here I am today because of my life experiences, which were not stellar. And just doing all I can now to help families, because I get it. Thankfully, neither one of them became violent or aggressive. And the way that you can do that too is love. Love is the antidote for everything. Love and security. If your child feels loved and secure and safe, they will be fine. I mean, we moved several times just to be safe. And I
Yeah.
think that meant a lot to them. Later on, their dad and I were able, we became friends, and we were able to co-parent. But in the beginning, it was just about safety and security. And I had to not care about, his feelings, and focus on my children and their safety and my safety.
hmm Yeah. So as you're talking, I started thinking about advice that sometimes our clients get from a parenting coordinator, that they say, you two, even though there's tremendous conflict and almost always domestic violence, You should sit together at your kids' events so they think that you're a unified um, couple. What do you think
What's
about
that?
that?
Yeah. My thing is, what's that energy like when they're sitting together?
Right.
Right? The child is going to sense that. If there's
Yeah.
still hostility, if we're just doing it to pretend,
Right.
then how do the children grow up thinking, oh well, we do this in public and we're just perfect in public, and then behind closed doors, we're like fearing for our
Yeah.
lives or whatever the situation is. So you want to be very careful of that because
Yeah.
again, the children know that there's not a unified front at home. Why are we pretending there's a unified front on the outside? You want to be open and transparent with them. Yes, this is the situation, and I don't feel safe. Let your child
Mhm.
know. However, I'm here to protect you. I'm here to keep you safe because you mean more to me than I mean to me. Let
Mhm.
them know how much you care, how much you love them. That will help them overcome anything. You know, what you're doing to keep them safe.
As you're talking about your view on sitting together at a game and faking it, I completely agree. And there's a woman that I interviewed in the past from Canada named Marnie Grundman, and she said another thing you're doing when you're pretending that everything is fine is you're teaching your children that if they are being abused and mistreated, that they have to be quiet and
Hmm.
smile and act like everything's fine. Is
Yeah,
that what you
yeah,
want your children to do? Is that the kind of relationship they should be involved with? If they know that they're not safe, that they should still fake it?
right. Yeah, because we are modeling for them the life we want them to imitate. We are their little microcosm of the world, right? So what we do at home, they're going to reflect, is going to be reflected in how they behave in the greater community.
Yeah. 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 So, oh my gosh, Teresa, like my paper is all filled up with all kinds of things that you've said so I can remember them all. But any other tips? I love how you talk about love and safety and security, that if your kid has that, they're going to be fine. That's so important for people to hear, I think, in this community in particular, because they feel like, what if my kid's not okay because of what they're dealing with on the other side? But having that one healthy parent. Any other tips for people besides approaching with love and curiosity and not saying you're good or you're bad, but that you can think of, especially when someone has a child or a teenager who's very
Yeah.
aggressive?
Yeah. So first of all, take care of yourself. I know it sounds a little what, take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
If you take care of yourself, if you're rested, if you've filled your cup, then when these things happen, you're able to be calm, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're stressed, if you're tired, if you're just, you're looking at life like it's the worst at the moment, you're not going to respond to your child in a way that serves them. You're not going to be present with your child to observe what is happening with them. So
Mm-hmm.
before a child becomes aggressive, there are things that we can look for. What was said before that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did we do before that, right? What are they responding to? Right.
Yeah.
And then look at the behavior, and then how are you responding after the behavior? Because that whole chain is what's going to determine if this behavior continues or if it decreases and extinguishes. Right? So
Mm.
become a detective, right?
Love it.
Maybe keep a little diary. Before this, I said this. And it's not necessarily what you said. How did you say it? How were you feeling when you said it? What were you projecting? Right? What in the environment changed before this behavior? And
So
then look at the behavior stuff. Listen to what your child is saying. Hear the words and hear how they're saying it. So you can only do that and be totally present when you've taken care of yourself. I found for me meditation really helped because I tell people if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't be I wouldn't have the freedom that I have, should we say,
mm.
because I worked in schools, and I mean I was getting kicked, punched, slapped, and spit on, and I had to remain calm. I mean, there were times when I was like, oh my Lord, just Lord, give me the strength not to punch this child
Mhm.
back. And I'm being very,
Right. Yes.
'Cause- and I have to walk away, like just call somebody, like I need somebody, or just step aside, take a breath, and come back to the situation. Because I
Mm-hmm.
understanding that this is a child who's going through something. Behaviors don't just happen.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just happen willy-nilly. There is always a reason. There's always, you know, um, there's always something behind it. You know, behaviors are, oh, how do we use this? Yeah, there's, yeah, they don't just happen. I can't,
Mhm.
the word just won't come to me right now, but there is always a function for a behavior. It's serving a purpose. Maybe it's helping that child relieve some stress. Maybe it's helping, you know, maybe they're learning to express themselves. We can teach them how to express themselves better or differently by how we express ourselves. Right.
Yeah,
So be
that goes.
mindful as you express yourself in certain situations because they model that. I mean, I've become my mother in a lot of ways. Some ways that I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And other ways I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. Because she also experienced domestic
Yeah,
violence. And I
yeah,
thought I would never, you know?
yep,
And yeah, never
yeah.
turned into, yeah, here I am
I
or
know.
was.
I'm so glad. This is so helpful. Thank you so much, Theresa, for everything. We're working on this book right now about how to handle when your ex is turning the kids against you. And there's a whole chapter on aggressive children and how to effectively deal with it and why it's happening to me and not my ex. And just asking you some of these questions, I'm like, I got to get this transcript because I'm going to use some of the tips that you gave in the book. So I really, really appreciate it. Can you tell people how to find you?
Alrighty, I am, where am I? I'm on Facebook. I don't do a lot of social media, I really don't, but I do post on Facebook. The Parenting on the Spectrum is posted there every Thursday live. Um, I do have a website, and again, not real active, but Teresa Alexander Income. Teresa Alexander Inman.com. Gosh, I can't even talk. Like, it's so crazy because everybody's like, you should promote yourself more. And whenever it comes to that part, notice I don't think I stumbled except for when you asked me.
I know. I know. So funny. Yeah. Well, if you can't, if people can't find you from what you just said, they can find me and ask for you, and I'll make sure they connect to you. But this has been really, really helpful, and it's been such a pleasure to talk to you again. And this will not be the last conversation we have.
It won't. And actually, Lisa, you have an appointment with somebody I referred to you tonight at 11. Yeah, a friend of mine, she called. I'm like, you've got to talk to Lisa. This is what she does. So, what you do is so important. And I just want to, just spread that because I didn't have a Lisa when I was going through my situation. And I just want everybody to know, you know, I've been there and got out. I want to help them get
Yeah.
out.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks so much. And I'm the same. I'm thrilled at what you do and that you bring so much to the table of what you do and that you can also be an excellent resource for our people.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been a joy, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Same. All right. Talk to you
Okay.
soon, Teresa.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye.